The story begins with a young boy named Jack, who lives quietly with his father and grows up loving the tales of giants his mother once read to him. Those stories told of monks who found magical beans that shot upward into towering stalks, reaching a mysterious land between earth and sky called Gantua, home to fearsome giants. The giants once climbed down those stalks and brought chaos and destruction upon the human world. At the same time, Princess Isabel heard the very same tale from her own mother. When the queen asked if she feared the two-headed giant who ruled over the rest, Isabel proudly said no. The queen continued. The monks softened the giants' hearts and forged a crown for King Eric, who used its power to command the giants and drive them back to Gantua. The stalks were cut down, peace returned, and the crown was buried with the king, turning the story into legend. That night Jack asked his father whether the giants would ever return. His father reassured him that King Eric's descendants would protect the world, then quietly added that giants were not real at all. Meanwhile, Isabel's mother gently reminded her that she carried King Eric's blood. After his father left, Jack reopened the final page, which warned that the giants would one day rise again to wage war on mankind and hunt down Eric's last descendant. 10 years later, Jack's uncle sent him to the city to sell their horse, telling him not to lose focus. Now grown, Jack searched for a buyer but soon found himself drawn toward a theater reenacting the legend of King Eric. There he noticed a beautiful girl before 3 men began bothering her. Jack followed them and stepped forward, taking a punch but calmly demanding they leave her alone. Royal guards arrived and the 3 men instantly backed away. Jack briefly believed their fear was aimed at him until he turned and realized the princess herself was standing there. After she rode away, he discovered his wagon had vanished. At the palace, King Bromwell scolded Isabel for sneaking out. She argued that if she was meant to be queen, she deserved control over her own life, especially the right to refuse a man twice her age. Meanwhile, Roderick and his aide Wick questioned a trembling monk. Growing suspicious, Roderick searched King Eric's old chamber and found the magical beans gone, though the crown remained. He ordered the city gates closed before the monk could escape. The monk, realizing he was being hunted, approached Jack and offered him the magical beans in exchange for his horse, promising they were worth a fortune, and warning Jack never to lose them or let them get wet. Before Jack could decide, the monk fled with the horse, only to be seized moments later at the gate. When Jack returned home with only 4 beans, his uncle erupted in fury, calling him a fool. He hurled the beans onto the floor and stormed out into the raging storm. Meanwhile, Roderick and Wick tortured the monk for answers. The monk warned that the beans were born from dark magic and should never have been uncovered, but Roderick ignored his words and killed him. Back at Jack's house, the boy grew anxious about his uncle still lost in the storm. At the same time, Princess Isabel, having fled the palace, lost her way and followed the warm light from Jack's home. As Jack prepared to go out and search, she knocked softly on the door. He led her inside, and the two spoke quietly while rainwater slowly crept across the floor toward one of the fallen beans. Jack showed her his childhood book about giants, the two of them quietly pretending not to recognize each other from the marketplace. Neither noticed the bean beginning to sprout. Suddenly, the house shook as a massive beanstalk exploded through the floor, launching the entire building high into the sky. Jack was flung outside while Isabel remained trapped inside. Determined to save her, Jack climbed the rapidly rising stalk and reached the house. But when Isabel opened the door, she accidentally pushed him away. Jack grabbed her hand but lost his grip, falling with her mother's bracelet clutched tightly in his grasp. Miraculously, he survived the long drop and lay unconscious on the ground. By morning, King Bromwell arrived and confronted Jack, demanding to know why he had the princess's bracelet. Elmont, the elite guard who had seen Jack before, recognized him. After Jack explained everything, the king ordered him, Roderick and Elmont, to climb the beanstalk and rescue Isabel. Their ascent began, though Roderick was clearly hiding his own intentions. Jack asked Elmont what he expected to find above the clouds and whether he truly believed in giants. Elmont said the legends might be true, but also warned Jack not to imagine he could ever win a princess's heart. Moments later, another soldier named Craw shoved Jack across a gap, nearly sending him plunging before the others dragged him back. The climb proved deadly, and by the next morning only 6 men remained. At the top they found the broken remains of Jack's house and spread out across the strange new land. Roderick cornered Jack, demanded the beans, and forced him to hand over the pouch, though Jack secretly hid 1 bean for himself. Meanwhile, Elmont and Craw found signs Isabel had left behind. Jack discovered the book he had given her, confirming she'd passed through the area. Broken branches nearby hinted that something enormous had dragged her away. Realizing she was in danger, Elmont split the team. Jack and Craw searched for food only to stumble into a trap. Elmont cut them loose, but moments later they heard heavy footsteps. They hid as a giant appeared, swallowed a sheep whole, then caught Craw's scent. Craw tried to run, but the giant closed the distance in a single stride. As the creature prepared to swallow him, Elmont charged and attacked only to be kicked aside and knocked unconscious. The giant seized both men and carried them away, unaware that Jack was quietly following behind. Meanwhile, the other group reached a waterfall. Roderick pretended to spot the princess and pointed forward, then shoved a soldier off the cliff the moment he stepped closer. A giant appeared from behind and swallowed Wick whole. Another giant approached, but Roderick raised King Eric's enchanted crown and its power stopped the creature from harming him. Jack continued tracking the giant until he reached their colossal city. Isabel, held captive, was being questioned about how she had arrived. She insisted she was alone, but General Fallon, the two-headed leader, recognized her as a descendant of King Eric. He dragged her outside and proudly announced to the other giants that humans had returned. Moments later, another giant arrived carrying Craw and the unconscious Elmont. Fallon interrogated the captives, but Craw mocked him and was eaten instantly. Hearing the commotion, Jack crept closer, slipping past two giants. Fallon threatened to eat Isabel next, and an argument erupted among the giants over who deserved the humans. Then Roderick appeared wearing the enchanted crown. Every giant, including Fallon, immediately knelt. Elmont thought they were saved, but Roderick marched straight to the throne and declared himself king. Shocked, Elmont and Isabel listened as he ordered the giants to prepare for war. He commanded, "At dawn we march on the human world." Fallon was enraged, but Jack had slipped into a chamber overflowing with treasures stolen from mankind. Hearing Isabel's screams, he rushed toward the kitchens where a giant was preparing to cook her. Unable to open her cage, Jack slipped a knife to Elmont just before the giant returned, covered Elmont in flour, and hurled him into an oven like a pastry. Jack climbed above while Elmont cut himself free. The giant suddenly grabbed Isabel, but Jack seized a massive cleaver and drove it deep into the creature's back. Isabel escaped. Elmont broke free and the enraged giant slammed itself against the walls, trying to crush Jack until it accidentally destroyed itself. Elmont stared in disbelief that Jack had taken down a giant. Jack urged them to hurry. He knew a way out. Far below, the king asked his general whether they should cut down the beanstalk, but the general hesitated, fearing none of their men would return alive. Jack, Elmont and Isabel followed a river until they found a giant asleep on the edge of a cliff. Jack formed a quick plan. They would tuck a beehive into the giant's helmet and let the swarm wake it, hoping the panic would send it stumbling into the abyss instead of chasing them. The men crept forward, slipped the hive into the giant's mask and hid. Seconds later the giant bolted awake, flailed wildly and toppled off the cliff. Relieved, Isabel and Jack embraced, though Elmont clearly disapproved. At the cliff's edge, he told them he would stay behind to deal with Roderick. Jack was to take the princess home. He was her protector now. Isabel said goodbye and the two began their descent. Down below, the fallen giant struck the ground near the base of the beanstalk. The king saw the massive body and, fearing for his kingdom, decided that protecting the realm mattered more than saving his daughter. Ignoring the general's protests, he raised his sword and struck at the stalk himself, whispering apologies to Isabel with every blow. Seeing his resolve, the general ordered the soldiers to help cut it down. Meanwhile, Jack and Isabel were already climbing lower, watching their homeland come into view. Far above, Elmont waited for Roderick on the cliff. As he rested, the giant army appeared. Roderick emerged and headed toward the edge, but Elmont ambushed him, knocking the remaining beans from his pouch. A brutal fight erupted. Roderick shouted for help, but General Fallon told the giants to drag Roderick back rather than save him. The villain at first gained the upper hand, but Elmont seized a sword and wounded him. Roderick shoved Elmont off the cliff only for Elmont to hurl his knife and kill him. The giants smashed through the stone barrier to retrieve their would-be king, but they were too late. Fallon took the enchanted crown, slipped it onto his finger, and became the new ruler of the giants. Below, soldiers had carved through the lower trunk. When the beanstalk finally snapped, the entire structure shuddered violently. Jack and Isabel felt it collapsing beneath them. As it fell, Jack told her to hold tight. High above, Elmont leapt onto the stalk at the last moment while Fallon stood watching from the cliff. Jack grabbed a dangling vine and swung them clear as the beanstalk crashed toward the ground. The upper section, where Elmont clung, landed near the palace and he jumped away from it just before impact. The king, devastated, believed Isabel was gone. Then she and Jack emerged. She told her father everything that had happened above the clouds. Grateful beyond words, the king thanked Jack and confessed he could never repay him. Jack, heartbroken, said goodbye and gave Isabel the book so she would remember him. She returned to the palace, and the kingdom believed the threat was over. But far above, Fallon found the magical beans Roderick had dropped. He threw them into the water and another beanstalk began to rise. Before it fully formed, the giants climbed aboard and Fallon followed. On the ground, Jack found his horse and saw the giants descending. He rode at once to warn the king. Moments later, the giants reached the human world. Jack shouted to a monk to ring the alarm bells, then sprinted toward the king and Isabel, only for them to see several giants already closing in behind him. Everyone raced toward the city walls. Fallon charged straight for the king. While inside the city, Elmont rallied the defenders, readying archers and burning oil for the coming attack. The giants closed in on Jack as he galloped toward the gate. The moment the king crossed the bridge, the drawbridge rose. Jack leapt across at the last second and Fallon jumped after him, only for Elmont to shove the two-headed giant back into the boiling oil below. Outside, the rest of the giants hooked the bridge with massive chains and began pulling it down, while Fallon survived beneath the surface. Inside the city, Elmont reunited Jack with Isabel and told the king that Fallon now wore the enchanted crown. Until they recovered it, the giants would never stop. Suddenly, the giants hurled a gigantic bell over the walls and hooked the bridge again, dragging it down with brute force. The king ordered Isabel to light the beacon in his chamber to warn the neighboring kingdoms, and he commanded Jack to protect her. Isabel led Jack through a secret tunnel beneath the castle that ran past King Eric's tomb. They reached the royal chambers, but the stone beneath their feet cracked open. Fallon was breaking through from below. They ran as the giant burst into the room. Outside, soldiers fought desperately with spears, fire and whatever weapons they had left. For a moment, they slowed the giants, but their defenses soon collapsed under the sheer power of the attackers. Flames spread across the city as Fallon caught Isabel's scent and stormed toward the chamber. Jack and Isabel hid behind the throne, but Fallon smashed through the wall and found them. They fled up a narrow stairway, but the giant reached in and grabbed her. Jack fought back, though Fallon was seconds from killing him. When the giant opened his jaws to swallow Jack whole, he pulled out his last magic bean and shoved it into Fallon's mouth. The bean sprouted instantly inside the giant and tore him apart from within. Fallon exploded and the fast-growing stalk burst through the castle walls, sending debris raining across the courtyard. Among the rubble, Fallon's severed hand, still wearing the crown, fell beside Jack. Outside the walls, the giants finally tore the bridge free. As the humans sealed the inner gates preparing for a final stand, they suddenly froze. A towering new beanstalk erupted from the ruins, shooting into the sky. Stunned, the giants dropped their weapons and fell to their knees. Jack stepped forward wearing the enchanted crown, and Isabel took his hand as the giants bowed to their new ruler. Years later, Jack finished telling this very story to his children, how the giants were banished again, and how a princess fell in love with a farm boy. When the children nervously asked what would happen if the giants returned, Jack simply smiled and said the crown was kept somewhere no one could ever reach. Isabel joined them, and the family lived in peace as the legend faded into myth.